if antibiotics are more freely available and are used inappropriately, the consequences are dire. I'm really passionate about teaching online. I've spent the last 5 years teaching trainee pharmacists how to sit the national registration exam. The whole thing was for healthcare professionals only. Screw it, I'm going to branch out and I'm just going to teach everything I know in terms of pharmacy. A lot of patients that felt that they didn't understand their condition or how the medication worked were tuning into my content. So make it as simple to understand and sort of started to empower patients. You just get hate comments from or just pissed off people on the internet. To see that much racism online, that was new to me. I started to learn to ignore them. That essentially was my solution, right? Is that the solution? I don't know. A lot of the pharmacists that you see work in stores, on the street, and are not working in hospitals or GP practices, even though that's changing. People really misinterpret the amount of clinical knowledge pharmacists have.
What's the most underrated skill for a pharmacist?
For me, it's compassion. That's what a patient remembers.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tamp Podcast. Today's guest is a specialist antimicrobial and HIV pharmacist, senior lecturer at De Montfort University, and the founder of MicroPharm, a digital education platform that's supporting thousands of pharmacy trainees and professionals across the UK and beyond. He's a powerful voice in healthcare education, using social media to simplify complex clinical topics, challenge outdated norms, and even respond to racism and online hate with courage, clarity, and a touch of humor. And little did I know, is also a barista. Yasir Sacranie, welcome to the Tamp Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Was that intro more or less?
Yeah, it was good. Only one thing.
Go ahead.
But I know this is why I need to update every single website I'm on. So I did the antimicrobial stint for 4 years.
Yeah.
I worked as a HIV specialist for a year. And then 2 years after that, this is what I need to update. I worked as a specialist in interstitial lung disease.
Okay.
All of those probably mean nothing to a lot of people that are out there that are not in the healthcare space. And quite often when we're specialists, we can bounce around in different specialities, but everything else, bang on.
Every time I prepare one of these podcasts, I pull information from everywhere.
Yeah.
So I've got to check all the websites, the LinkedIn, historical data. And yeah, there's a margin of error.
Yeah,
So
but it's fine. I know exactly why. And it's my own website, by the way.
Okay, I got you on initially because I wanted to talk about MicroPharm because I love what you do. And only then did I realize that you're also a barista. What's going on there? Tell me about this.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about this. So I've loved coffee for a very long time. And when I was 16, my brothers bought me a coffee machine, but it was a manual coffee machine. It was £99. It was terrible, right? It came with a warranty. I probably used that warranty 7 times in 2 years, right? Because it just couldn't really keep up with the making manual coffees every day. But since then, I've fell in love with the process of making coffee, particularly at home, and then upgraded to a Sage, as most people do, and probably made some infrequent coffee content alongside my journey as a pharmacist for 5 years. Anytime I'd create some good latte art, I'd make a post. I'd sometimes make some posts about if I never pursued pharmacy, I'd open a coffee shop. And I know it resonated with a lot of people. And I was very passionate about it, but I also knew that financially it probably wasn't the best decision.
That's the big, what, going into pharmacy or going into coffee?
So it's ditching pharmacy to go into working as a barista, right?
That's the reality that you found out, because a lot of people, for example, they watch our content and go, oh, you make great content, I love what you do, such a cool coffee shop. People don't realize how bad the margins are.
Yeah.
Remember, coffee's got a great margin. Yeah, great margin on coffee, but then you got to pay rent, you got to pay electrics, you got to pay VAT, you got to pay tax. So the margins are nowhere near what people think.
Yeah, there was this coffee shop that I really liked going to next to my university. And I said to the person who was the barista was also the owner, and I said to him, I really want to open a coffee shop. He said, "What are you studying now?" So I said, "Pharmacy." He said, "Stick to pharmacy." Yeah.
Well, I get people come to me a lot. They want advice on opening a coffee shop, and they'll say, can you give me advice on opening a coffee shop? I'll say, yeah, don't do it. That's basically what I say. And they go, if they insist, and I'm no, but I really want to. I'm like, I wouldn't. No, but I really, really want to. And if they insist and insist, then I'll actually give them some guidance.
Yes, but you want to give them that warning first.
It's a tough game. It's a lot of work for very little return.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to see, what's your experience of being behind the bar?
Okay, so essentially, I should have led on to this. So it came to a point where I was really struggling with managing. I was already struggling. For the past 3 years, I've been struggling managing the business and working for the NHS. So what I was initially doing was running the business, which is teaching trainee pharmacists how to pass the registration exam, running the online platform and the social media stuff surrounding that. And then I used to work 2 days a week as a lecturer, and 3 days a week I used to work in the hospital.
And what were you doing the other 5 days a week?
Yeah, exactly. So every evening I was working on social media stuff and the business, and it just slowly started dropping down. So I dropped down my hospital days to 2 days a week. So then I was working 4 days a week, combining lecturing and hospital pharmacy. Then I realized I can't do the lecturing alongside it, and I was like, which one do I leave? And I was thinking I'm teaching people with the business anyway, so I left lecturing, and then finally this year I was like, I need to leave my hospital role because working alongside doing this alongside the business just didn't make sense. It was too many hours. I've got a little one right now. I was like, it's just too much.
How old?
One. Yeah, so only one. So,
Mine's two.
Yeah, so as soon as, and you probably know this, as soon as he was born, everything changed. I was like, oh my God, like I need to really reassess what I'm doing.
Absolutely. I've had to do exactly the same.
So when I officially left my hospital role, which was March of this year, I still have the opportunity to work I've got a bank contract with them where I can locum anytime. As soon as I sort of left, my cousin was opening a coffee shop in Atom. And I said to him, whatever you do, I want to work there as a barista. And I was like, don't need pay. I'll do it for the fun, do it for the content. And I said, I know my audience is going to love this as well because I've been saying this for ages. And I said, your family, me seeing this coffee shop being successful, with using my audience, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, the experience has been amazing. It's been different, definitely a lot harder than making coffees at home, and it's non-stop. But I remember I did this. We opened for late nights. So Thursday to Sunday we open for late nights, and we do house-made desserts alongside the coffee. And we've got all the crazy people that have coffee after 8 p.m. join us in the evening. And I swear that in those 4 hours, I probably had a 2-minute break, but I absolutely loved the 4 hours. And that's when I was like, I'm so glad I did this.
It's so exhausting, such hard work for such little financial reward, but people still find it really fulfilling. It's a weird industry.
It's a weird industry, but it's also goes back to one thing I've learned about myself, and I know a lot of people resonate with this. What started to happen when you move into these specialist roles is we used to prescribe for about 1,000 patients. So I'm an independent prescriber as well as a pharmacist. So you have to do a separate course for that.
So let me know. Sorry, tell me what is an independent?
So it means I can prescribe most medications that are available to patients. So we have a lot of there's so much to say about this, but pharmacists can do an extra qualification. It's a 6-month course, but you do it in a certain specialty. So mine was at the time was in ear infections, and I said I want to prescribe for ear infections, and you have to work with a prescriber. So I worked with an ENT consultant, doctor in the hospital, and you have to go through all these sorts of exams, role plays, And at the end of that course, you can prescribe medication within that certain competency. Now, what's happening is all pharmacists, as of 2026, will be independent prescribers as soon as they sit there after they pass their registration exam. So that means I can prescribe most medications.
But that would be to patients under your care.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's not like Joe Blogs can come to you and say, "Hey."
Oh no, yeah, yeah, absolutely not. And what you also have to do is you have to assess this yourself, but you have to prove that you're competent in that area. So if you were ever questioned on what you're prescribing, so if my specialty was interstitial lung disease in my last role, if I was prescribing medication for high blood pressure, something went wrong, I'd be questioned on why on earth were you prescribing for high blood pressure when your competency is in.
But it's good that they've got those checks in place.
Absolutely.
For those of you who don't know who Yasir Sacranie is, can you tell us who you are?
Yeah. So, um, despite leaving practice, a lot of what I do and a lot of my week still is surrounding pharmacy. So I'm a pharmacist. And that's one of the main reasons how I gained somewhat of a community online through my role of educating as a pharmacist. I'm a lecturer, so I still do some lecturing work to this day. I love the teaching side, not so much the marketing side, and that's the reason why I sort of pursued educating more, but had stepped back from my lecturing role. And very passionate about coffee, so barista as well. But most importantly, I just want, I'm really passionate about teaching online. And that's why, despite not even working in practice, a lot of my time I'm teaching pharmacists about different health conditions, things that I've learned in practice. And I've spent the last 5 years teaching trainee pharmacists how to sit the national registration exam. And that's sort of their final hurdle before they can work as a qualified pharmacist. National assessment, and there's no, essentially, they're working full time and they're expected to learn about the assessment on their own. And that's where a lot of people struggle. And that's the reason why I have a team of myself and 20 other educators. And our goal is to make people pass that assessment. And we have a 98% pass rate.
Wow. So you've used essentially what is a natural skill, which is to teach, which is not easy. To be able to teach and communicate knowledge is not an easy thing at all. And you've combined that with a business model, which you've managed to make financially viable. That's lovely. That's great to hear. Tell me about the origin of MicroPharm.
Yeah, so origin in terms of the name is quite interesting because I get loads of theories about why it's called MicroPharm. Someone said to me, is it like micro bits of pharmacy? It was actually because I started my antimicrobial role, which is working in microbiology. But I was also a pharmacist. So I combined the two together to call it MicroPharm. The whole goal was COVID hit. We were spending a lot more time at home. So for me, it was hospital, home, because I was still working in the hospital at the time. And what I wanted to do was, because I started this new role as an antimicrobial pharmacist, I wanted to learn about different bacteria and what infections they cause. And whilst I'm doing that learning, I just sort of make a post about it and make videos about it and post it online and just see if people are interested. So I did this for about a year until I realized like you really run out of content because I'm just spending a lot of my time talking about antibiotics. And I know there's so much more medication out there, but I'm just not talking about it because I'm adamant that it's going to be all about microbiology. And that's when I just thought, look, screw it. I'm going to branch out and I'm just going to teach everything I know in terms of pharmacy. The whole thing was for healthcare professionals only to be following it. Then I started to see that a lot of patients that felt that they didn't understand their condition or how the medication worked were tuning into my content, and they were quite upset with the use of medical jargon. So they're like, a lot of the terminology that you're using, we just don't understand it. Ironically, it was never intended for them. but they were upset because they want to consume more of it. So I adjusted the way I was approaching these videos, and removed as much medical jargon as possible. So make it as simple to understand as possible. And that's when I started to see that what was happening was a lot of people that just felt like they didn't understand how their medication worked now felt like they could learn about their condition, their medication, and sort of started to empower patients.
That thing of taking something complex and expressing it in a simple way clearly works.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beauty of that, and I always say it to people, sometimes you won't be the person that's trending or following these trends, but as long as you're providing useful content, you'll never run out of content, right?
Yeah.
So you can just carry on turning out that content compared to someone who's constantly worried about what's trending.
What were the early days like? I mean, how did you get it started? At the very beginning?
Literally just an Instagram page. It was just an Instagram page. What I was doing at the time was a lot of my role was about telling people off for not prescribing the right antibiotics or prescribing antibiotics when they shouldn't be. And what I didn't like about that exchange is because people were ringing me to sort of get approval for very restricted antibiotics, it just felt like a battle every time. And what I was thinking in my mind was if this prescriber had a good understanding of why I'm telling them that this is not the right antibiotic to go for, then ultimately it's not a battle and we work together to find the right antibiotic for a patient. So what I started to do is create this content that's educating people about what would be the right antibiotic for different bacteria, and started to sort of do friend requests. I didn't have my face on there for the first year, by the way, and do friend requests with all the doctors that didn't listen to me, and I had some success with that. Not everyone wanted to learn about microbiology outside of work, but my whole aim was like, if I start educating people on what my role is about, I will no longer look like this person that's just trying to tell you off, and realize that the whole reason behind the role was to make sure we use antibiotics more appropriately, which means that we can use antibiotics longer overall.
I've got a question for you because my partner's from South America and their approach to antibiotics is completely different to ours. Are you aware of some countries having a much more free or relaxed approach to antibiotics? And why is there a difference between countries that have that approach and the UK, and which one is right or which one is wrong? I mean, can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I would say is there's a whole host of different reasons. So, one could be regulation. So, there's less regulation. So, there's many countries I've visited where you can buy antibiotics over the counter, right? So, goes back to regulation. It goes back to the fact that honestly, we're privileged to be in a position where we've got sufficient funding for healthcare to fund members of staff like me in hospitals, and microbiology consultants as well that can give you specialist advice surrounding this. Ultimately, if antibiotics are more freely available and are used inappropriately, the consequences are dire.
The consequences for the individual or for the population?
For both. So for both. So if antibiotics are available more freely, this ultimately increases the risk of making bacteria that are resistant to these antibiotics more prevalent. So what tends to happen is these antibiotics can essentially remove all the bacteria that they're active against and single out the ones that they're not active against. Ultimately, it makes these bacteria more prevalent. It makes resistant infections more prevalent. I will give you one scenario where we actually presented this case nationally that gives you an idea of just how difficult it can become. We had a patient that had several infections and was hospitalized several times. What we were able to ascertain was a lot of times that she was admitted to the hospital, she was prescribed antibiotics that were much broader than they needed to be in terms of their spectrum of activity. So they were essentially having an impact on way more bacteria than they needed to have an impact on. And what that ultimately meant was when we saw her in hospital, we tested every single antibiotic that we had at the hospital against the bacteria that was driving this infection. And it was resistant to all the antibiotics that we had in the hospital. The only antibiotic that we could get, we had to order it in specially for this patient. And it was the only antibiotic that would work against this bacteria. And the reason why we get to situations like this is ultimately because antibiotics are being used inappropriately. We essentially speed that process up if we continue using antibiotics.
And what about the development of new antibiotics? Is that like an ongoing, constant development, or are we limited as to how many we can have?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. And I spend a lot of time speaking about this when I talk about antimicrobial resistance. So development of new antibiotics. So when you think about development of new antibiotics, you have to just think of development of drugs. And where should pharmaceutical companies be putting their resources, right? So when you're thinking of producing a new antibiotic, I'm just going to give like really rough estimates, but let's say you spend £1 billion. It's probably a lot more now, but let's say you spend £1 billion developing a new drug, a new antibiotic, and as soon as it reaches the market and it's ready to be given safely to patients after all the clinical trials and after all that investment, what we do, we being the hospital, is we take this antibiotic and we say, because it's a new antibiotic, we want to use it only when we absolutely need to. And we're going to make it highly restricted and it's not going to be highly available. In fact, we only want the specialists to know about this antibiotic. So ultimately, what that means is this antibiotic that they've spent so much money on is hidden, right? In this sort of vault where we just don't want people to know about it unless it's absolutely necessary. So what tends to happen is when it comes to funding for new antibiotics, it's not a medication that will be freely used after it reaches the market, when it reaches the market.
So there's no return on investment, basically.
Exactly. And there's no incentive to produce new antibiotics. So what tends to happen quite often is a lot of the new antibiotics on the market are just structural adjustments to what we already have. Or there will be an addition of a component that makes that antibiotic more likely to work, but it will just be a structurally similar antibiotic to what was already on the market. And that innovation of completely new antibiotics, that has really dwindled.
But those, shall we say, adaptations of the existing ones, do they function against resistant bacteria?
They do, but they're like with new antibiotics. So there was an example of a new antibiotic that reached the market, and this particular antibiotic that reached the market, within 1 year, we started to see resistant strains to that antibiotic, and that's not because of the fact that it was structurally similar. It was just the nature of bacteria. So ultimately, the other problem that you have is you are making a medication that can ultimately be ineffective
Within a short space of time.
Within a short space of time, yeah.
Wow. It's amazing, fascinating. Just going back onto my last question on beginnings of MicroPharm, did you expect it to grow into what it is today?
No, is the first answer to your question. And the second answer is it was very difficult in the first year. And I know you could probably resonate with this when it comes to growing on social media. The growth was like very slow at the start. So I wish I could say it was like rapid growth from the start. But the first 2 years felt like like I was talking to nobody. I ultimately had an audience of 1,000 people in those first 2 years, and at the time that felt amazing, but I wouldn't say it was just this rapid growth. What tends to happen with a lot of content creators is you have this slow period, and then you start to figure out what's working, and then that growth starts to come later on. Sometimes you get content creators that just boom out of the box because they've just got such a creative idea. But for a lot of content creators, it's a struggle. So I didn't expect to reach where I am today, but I think a lot of that growth came in the last year or two.
And this is something I'm really interested in. How do you keep your content engaging and still accurate?
It ultimately it's very difficult. And what I found, there's two things, right? There's one, the fact that your audience starts to get bored with the type of content that you're going to be creating. So you always need to be testing fresh ideas. And the second thing is you're going to get bored with the content that you're creating. So you're going to say to yourself, I'm going to teach people, I'm going to do a quiz video every day for pharmacy students, let's say. Try doing that for 5 years, right? After even 3 months, you're going to be sick
You'll
of
have
making those
nightmares
videos.
about it.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes something will be working really well, but you're just so sick of it that you're probably going to stop doing it. So you always have to, you essentially have to find a balance between content that you want to make and content that your audience wants. I know one of my friends, he's a content creator, and what he does is he knows what his audience wants, but he is really sick of creating that content. And what he does is he creates 80% of his content for the audience and 20% of the content he really likes to make. And he's found for him, that's a sweet spot where he can still keep going, even though 80% of the content is not what he wants to make. I really struggle with that ratio. So I would probably say it's half and half for me.
I don't know why, it makes me think of a rock band that's made one good album and they're touring and everyone wants them to play that one good album.
Yeah.
Like, no, we want to play the new stuff.
Yeah, like we don't want to
And
hear
no
the
one
new
wants
stuff.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's something that people constantly struggle with, being content creators.
I think any creator. But
Yeah.
with content creation more, because if we talk about musicians and filmmakers and artists and what have you, the creativity is still intense, but the amount of content that's needed to be created for digital content creator is off the scale.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I don't care if you're a touring musician or street musician or artist or graffiti artist, but to be a successful content creator in this day and age, it's really hard. The amount of work you've got to put in and publish constantly, and you can't stop, you can't give up.
Exactly. Honestly, it's a quantity game. So I have some friends that are content creators. They produce these videos that honestly could be in a documentary. Very highly produced, amazing videos. But their growth is a fraction of other content creators because it's a numbers game. So it gets to a point where you're like, you need to, like, some people will advise you, like, post 5 times a day if you really want to see reach, which is like just the thought of that and working full time.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Unless we can do, I don't know, can AI build like maybe an alter ego of ourselves and do it for us?
100%. You can clone your voice now.
Really?
Well, yeah.
So maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe we clone ourselves and then put ourselves to work while we're asleep.
Exactly. Video, not so much. But even with that, like, I'll tell you what, the main challenge that people have with AI, because a lot of, we speak about these softwares a lot in content creation circles. The challenge is you being the director, you want it to look a certain way. And when you produce something that's AI generated, and it doesn't look that way, you know what your content, you know that your audience is not going to enjoy that. So having that creative freedom to make the content exactly how you want it is just one of the challenges that just can't be replicated.
I think it could be possible to do it with AI, but you'd need to direct the AI so much that it would almost make it pointless to be using the AI to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you teaching a new barista to make you good coffee, so that you don't have to make it for yourself, and then at the end you're like, I could do it myself. Like,
exactly. Have you faced any challenges in sharing clinical knowledge on social media?
Yes. So I would say yes and no. So I've been privileged enough to not be in a position where I've been heavily scrutinized in my workplace, but I do know a lot of content creators that have been like sort of pulled into meetings with their manager to say we don't know how we feel about this, and that it's even when the content is really straight and is just using very reputable sources. Sometimes just people don't understand social media, right? And you still have this in healthcare today, where people are being scrutinized for their content online when they're producing amazing content online that's so helpful to the public. So I would say I've been lucky in the fact that a lot of the managers that I've had have understood the content. Um, but you always get some level of scrutiny online anyway. Particularly, yeah,
The shit that comes
yeah,
out
exactly.
online, man.
And you imagine trying to navigate being a healthcare professional during COVID, because that's when we started. In fact, I did the opposite, and which I sort of regret to this day. But I didn't speak. I intentionally avoided speaking about COVID because I was like, it's it's suicide for me in terms of the comments that I'm going to receive, right? And maybe it was a good thing because I knew at the start I didn't have uh, I didn't have the capacity to endure those comments. I'd probably stop making content because of the comments I was receiving. But some comments that I would receive is sort of like essentially we've been incentivized to have people vaccinated, and of course living in the UK uh, and working for the NHS, there's no incentive for any of this. So, but you have to just sort of receive these comments online,
I
right?
mean, look, we received our fair bit when we started. To be honest, I think anything you post online, suddenly all these idiotic minions that live in the cupboard suddenly all
Yeah,
crawl out and they find a voice and they just
exactly. Yeah,
talk shit. But you've got to see them for who they are and call them out for who they
yeah,
are,
100%.
essentially. But let's get on into that later.
Yeah.
What's been the most surprising reaction or moment online you've had so far? Could be good or bad, either way.
Okay, so I'm gonna go for bad, okay, because you sort of mentioned it in at the start of the video as well. So we had this whole these crazy riots that happened last year, and it was sort of heavily Islamophobic and heavily sort of anti-immigration, and just out of nowhere, I just started receiving. I was doing a day in the life as a pharmacist, and I started receiving I started noticing an increase in hate comments, like
Just out of nowhere.
out of nowhere because the riots were happening. So it
But
sort of
someone must have flagged you up somewhere and
yes.
shared your profile amongst
Oh well,
the critters, the minions.
yeah. So what was happening? No, it got worse. So, but it was intentional from my end. So what happened was this video was generally doing well, and it sort of created this environment where someone who was racist and a fascist doesn't have this confidence to just speak out. But it created this environment where everyone just felt confident. Those people who felt like that just felt like saying, get out of our country and stuff like that, right? But I saw this increase in it during the riots, and I sort of just leaned into it. I felt I felt like I was in a place where I was creating content for several years, and I thought I had a thicker skin. So I did a post. The next post I was doing day in the life of a day in the life of a pharmacist, and rather than saying day in the life of a pharmacist, I said this is what Muslims are doing whilst you think that we're the reason for all the problems in the country. And I just did a day in the life, like what I'd normally be doing as a pharmacist. And people loved it. Like 90% of the comments were like so positive to say like these people are not representative of us. But I probably got I remember that video, just that video had 8,000 comments.
8,000
8,000
comments.
comments. Yeah. So it
Wow.
really like it was really resonated with a lot of people for them to show support, and it also pissed off a lot of people. And I just got like a whole host of Islamophobic comments. And I was just I was replying to them. I was
Oh,
having
you'd actually
fun.
reply to them.
I was having fun. I was making
Jesus.
videos out of the responses. So someone said, "Go back to where you came from," and I said I was actually born in the hospital that I work in now. So go back to work. I was just really having fun with it. It it was great for growth as well, by the way.
I
It
can
was
imagine.
reaching millions of people. But after a week of that, I honestly I couldn't take anymore. I switched off like notifications for the comments, and then I just went back to my usual broadcast. And I was like, I respect the people who like make controversial like address like medical misinformation online and just go head on with people who are spreading medical misinformation. And there's people like one of the content creators, his name's Dr. Ids. He just goes head on with people who are spreading medical misinformation online, and has this constant battle every day. But I realize like I don't have that thick skin.
But no, but it shows you're a very grounded person. You don't have the same levels of hatred inside you that the people have
Yeah.
towards you, and that's a really admirable thing. Um, you know, sometimes even some of the comments we had in the early days, like I found it tough.
Yeah.
I found it tough, but then you just think, well, hopefully people will see them for who they are. And
Yeah.
I'm the sort of guy, I actually didn't respond because I didn't want it to spiral.
Yeah.
So I just ignored them, and I don't remember the last time we've had a shitty comment now.
Yeah.
Maybe they woke up one day.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah. And just
knows?
realized it was the new day.
So with regards to clinical work and teaching, you mentioned earlier about how you had to shift your balance, because that's what I was going to ask you. How did you balance being a clinical pharmacist, university lecturer, educator, social media? Can you run us through about how you managed to work that and what you ended up having to drop?
Yeah. So when I started creating content, and it honestly at the start it didn't take me much time. Probably took me about 15 minutes per post, um, and that's primarily because my initial posts were very simple. Like it was like a little poster with a mnemonic that would be helpful for students. And then there was no videos for probably the first year. I didn't create any videos. So that was very simple to do alongside work. And because it was the pandemic, I was not married at the time. I had the privilege of time. And that the sad reality is a lot of people could probably make great content out there. They don't have the privilege of time, right? So for my first year, I had the time to create the content, a lot more time at home. Then I started to learn video editing, and I started to take it seriously, and I started creating videos online. And that's when it was a bit more challenging in terms of time. My whole theory behind this was I want to educate as much people as possible, and I want it to be free, and then hopefully from adverts I will create some sort of revenue. I realize it's very hard to do it that way. It can take multiple years. So if anyone's got this perception that you're gonna, after a year or two, the ad revenue is gonna fund everything that you want to do, there's just too many creators online for that to happen. So that's when I started to create these study guides. So I created study guides, and I was selling them for PDFs for £5, and they were specifically for the registration exam. And then leading on from that, I started to create crash courses. And what I was trying to do at the time was very modest goals. I wanted to cover the amount I was paying on editing software and my camera, and hopefully I could pay someone freelance to edit my videos for me. Um, and then I realized there was a huge appetite for it. So started continuing to grow, and then I had this sort of shift in terms of the balance where I was generating a good income from teaching online, where it was at a certain point it was matching what I was doing in terms of lecturing.
Oh, really?
So I was lecturing 2 days a week there, so it was matching what I was doing in terms of lecturing. The first thing I did was initially I was very hesitant to leave lecturing. I thought that I thought this title really matters. And one of the things that I've learned along the way over the past 5 years is I really probably not perfected this, but really let go of the fact that people don't care about your titles and your qualifications as long as you're good at educating, right? And what I mean by that, I don't mean teach with no qualifications.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is I started to when I left lecturing, so I just finally decided to leave lecturing. I said, I'm no longer a lecturer, I'm a visiting lecturer. And I was waiting for someone to say, how the hell can he teach us? He's not an active lecturer. And I was waiting for those comments from pharmacists and trainee pharmacists. To this day, I never received a single comment. No one cares
Yeah.
whether you're a visiting lecturer or active lecturer, because they want to know whether you can teach them well for the exam that they're sitting.
But surely the fact that you were a lecturer already gives you
Yes,
the value.
exactly. And what I was saying to myself was, at that point, I was a lecturer for 5 years, and I wanted to leave lecturing so I can teach more online. But I was like, oh, but I need to hold on to it for a certain number of years. And I sat and thought to myself, what is that certain number of years? 10, 12, 13? Like, at what point do you say it's enough? So I was like, I feel like I've learned a lot of skills to feel confident in teaching. I'm very confident in teaching people for the registration exam. We have a good track record. I have to take that risk now or I never will.
Well, man, it's fascinating to hear what you've achieved and how you've done it. And it's not been a straight line path or journey. It's kind of like you figured out your strengths, your weaknesses, your abilities, what you can do, and you've fine-tuned it over the years, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Does your clinical experience influence the content you create?
This is a very good question. And this is something that made me hesitant on leaving clinical practice because of the content I'm creating. Because what I thought was, if I'm not working in practice, then do I have the right to be talking about medication online?
It's almost the same thing you're saying. If I'm no longer a lecturer,
Yeah,
will
yeah.
people still listen to me?
Exactly. And I felt
It's the small voice in our heads,
yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. And what for the past 7 years, I've been working in such highly specialist areas that the stuff that I'm talking about with healthcare professionals at work, if I was making content surrounding that if I was creating content exactly like the stuff that I'm talking about to healthcare professionals, I would lose my audience because it was we're talking about spectrum of activity for bacteria. We're talking about lab results for bacteria. I'm talking about interstitial lung disease, which is a very rare condition that most people have never heard of. So I started to realize everything I'm working in practice doesn't help me in terms of what I'm teaching. So I've never said, thank God I covered that at work because I can teach it online. It meant that I've got the tools to know where to look, but ultimately a lot of the content that I'm teaching online is a pharmacist's bread and butter. And what I started to realize is the more time I had to teach online, the more time I had to research things that I'm going to teach because practice started getting in the way of that. And I know a lot of healthcare creators that are online that have left practice primarily so they've got more time to research for videos that they're going to make because the stuff that they're doing at work actually gets in the way of them teaching.
I think some of the most informative videos for me when I watch your feed are when you just talk about medications that the population can take on a daily basis. What this is, what it does. It sounds simple as hell, but those for me are the most captivating.
Absolutely.
And you go through, I don't know, you've probably gone through all the top 100 used medications in the UK or something. I don't know how you make your list, but those are the ones where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that one, I take that one. No, I don't take that one, and I find those really informative. I find them fascinating. I think anything more complex probably would throw me off.
Yeah, 100%. And something that you realize, it's the same with owning a coffee shop. Do I feel like you need to be behind the coffee machine every day for you to talk to me about what an espresso is? No, because you've you've done the work to get you to that
But
stage.
here's the funny thing. I think I do.
Yeah. So that's that little voice in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Tables turn. Exactly. Same thing. It's exactly the same, isn't it? Do your students respond to you differently now that they see you as a content creator?
Yes. So what tends to happen is I taught at De Montfort University in Leicester, and what tends to happen is when we go to these national conferences, I'd often see my students, and they'd be like,
Will
say to
everyone
their
get their
friends,
phones out? And they'd all
yeah,
be like,
yeah, like he taught me. But yeah, I think the beauty of the content creation alongside while I was creating content while I was a lecturer. So I would say about 70% of the time that I was a lecturer, I was already creating content. So I had like my students that I was teaching at university already knew about MicroPharm, and they were, they sort of respected the craft with MicroPharm whilst I was lecturing. And even when I left, like every student that I spoke to about the decision for me leaving, so I was like, I'm gonna leave. I'll be leaving lecturing so I can work full time on MicroPharm. They were like, it's about time, or we knew it was going to happen. And the beauty of what I was doing was I was teaching undergraduate students. So when they qualify, they start their training year. So those students that I taught at university ended up going into their training year, and I started teaching them
oh,
for the exam.
wow. That's amazing. Right, I've got a little section I wanted to go on about, which is about racism and the online hate and humor. You know, you gave that really candid case of what happened and some of the comments you received. And I wanted to ask more about your reaction, mainly about how do you maintain your mental health in the face of online abuse? Because you seem to react in a way which for me was an admirable reaction. But we know not everyone can react like that, and not everyone takes it the same way. I mean, was your reaction something instinctive to you, or I don't know? How do you think you maintained it? Did you feel it difficult to maintain staying sane, or?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. Personally, I found it very difficult at the start. And that's primarily because the kind of content I was creating would never be controversial, right? I'm teaching people about medication. So I was never sort of prodding that
It's
audience.
like, what's the color of my skin or my religion
yeah.
got to do with medication?
Exactly. So it was very new to me at the start.
So it caught you off guard.
It caught me off guard. I think the only thing that helped is at that time I was a content creator for 3 years. So I already was familiar with what you were saying. You just get hate comments from or just pissed off people on the internet no matter what you do. So I had some sort of familiarity with that. And I guess that made me put me in a better position. But as I said to you already, a week into going head on with these comments, I started realizing it's not sane for me to carry on in this direction, right? So for me, I found a balance where I was like, I have to learn to ignore some comments, and some comments I can. And anytime I responded, I would never match that same energy. So my whole purpose for responding was to have a bit of fun, and and I also the one thing that I felt good about is when I was sharing these responses online, these funny responses, I knew the majority of people who were watching this and commenting were very supportive of my cause. And I think that's what sort of kept me grounded. One thing that I have, like, I grew up in Leicester. So I was born in Leicester, grew up in Leicester my entire life. We have a very strong BAME population in Leicester. So to see that much racism online, that was new to me. And like when I was receiving that racism and that the Islamophobic comments online, people would often say, like, people would interview me in the pharmacy space and they'd ask the question, oh, you must receive a lot of racism at work. And I said, actually, no, right?
That's the last place.
Yeah, that's the last place I would. So that was fairly new to me. And I probably had to learn the hard way of the fact that you're going to receive these kind of comments online. And what I started to do was I started to learn to ignore them. And and, and that essentially was my solution, right? But uh, is that the solution? I don't know.
I don't think there is one single one. I think everyone deals with it in their own different way, which is why I'm fascinated about your kind of using humor as a response. Was that more strategic, or was that just natural?
It was strategic. So I knew that in order to, because I, all of these comments that I found were based on ignorance, right? So um, what someone said was that all asylum seekers in the UK are relaxing in 4-star hotels. So clearly they have nothing to worry about. So there was one response that I did where I calculated this is just me being petty. I calculated the number of, I first created a list of all the 4-star hotels in the UK and then calculated the number of rooms there are in 4-star hotels and then the number of asylum seekers that there are in the UK. And I calculated it as 79 asylum seekers per 4-star hotel room. And then I said at the end of that video, I said, that doesn't sound like a very much of a 4-star experience to me. But the whole purpose was that it's an ignorant comment, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to show the world your ignorance.
Beyond it, it's
Yeah.
fucking stupid,
Yeah.
man. Call it out for what it is. I really believe that, man.
Yeah. So my whole thing was, I'm going to do it in a humorous way. I'm not going to match that same. I'm not going to be full of hate. I'm going to have a laugh with people, with the majority of people that completely understand that this is pure ignorance.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating and really clever, really, really clever. What does a typical work week look for you now?
Yeah. So one thing that I really appreciate about working full time on MicroPharm is I've got full flexibility of how I spend my time. A work day for me recently is childcare. It's honestly just childcare.
Yeah.
So
There's no nursery yet, right?
yeah, no nursery yet. So the
Exactly.
nursery starts in September.
Yeah.
My wife's gone back to full time work. So right now it's literally sharing childcare between family members and myself. So whoever can help out, so I can get a few hours of work done. But as soon as nursery starts, then probably focusing much more on MicroPharm. But the beauty is look, it's really challenging with having a little one and wife working full time. But I have the privilege of working in the evening when I want to. So, and I can spend time with my little one. I can spend time with my family, and you don't have that privilege when you're working full time. And I completely appreciate that it's a privilege. Like I never look at this and think, it's the grind that I put in. Like I realize sometimes uh, there are circumstances in place that someone could never be able to do what I'm doing. And this goes back to what I was saying before. You have to have 2 or 3 years of essentially working for free to build an audience. And I appreciate, I always tell people go into content creation, but I also appreciate that time constraints. I mean that I could create a lot more content that someone probably couldn't have because of responsibilities, right?
I get it, and I also relate very much to the where you are in terms of childcare. We did the same. We had our child at home full time with either me or mum, for 18 months,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's tough. But I was saying exactly the same to people when everyone's like, "Oh, but you can always put them in nursery sooner if you can. If you can't, well, first you're a financial constraint, so you can't.
Yeah.
But secondly, I was actually really grateful that I had a job where I could kind of clock in and out at my will
Yes.
in order to be able to spend time raising my child.
Yeah.
And I openly say I am, and I was very lucky to be in that position because loads of people aren't.
Yeah.
So I know you're finding it tough. I found it hard, but
It's a
it's worth
privilege.
it.
Yeah. But like this goes back to like the privilege that you have in terms of building some your own business. I know people in healthcare that miss the birth of their child because they were told you can't leave work. Even if they could have made adjustments to facilitate those people leaving work, sometimes just working with difficult managers means people miss these huge milestones,
I don't
right?
think there's any justification in any manager saying you can't be present for your child. But I mean,
100%.
that
100% agree.
that's just, it's wrong. It's every level of wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
There's no justification whatsoever you can give.
Yeah. And sometimes you're working with a pharmacy team that includes 100 people and probably 30 or 40 pharmacists. There are adjustments that you can make for people's huge milestones in people's life. Yeah.
Of course. I mean, yeah, there's no justification. So what does the behind the scenes look like now in terms of work for MicroPharm?
Yeah. So behind the scenes, we really do two things with MicroPharm. Well, three things. You've got the social media content. So that, of course, will always remain for free, right? And the whole purpose of me generating an income is so I can continue to make free content. Ultimately, and this takes a lot of time and a lot of resources to make. But because I generate income, I can continue to do that. So most of my content is still for free. What I also do is I've created a free plan for trainee pharmacists that can't afford the membership, where I can support them throughout the year. We deliver 30 webinars throughout the year, and they can access that at any time with their membership. So that ultimately means that I can cater for thousands, right? And then for a select group of those trainees, we provide a comprehensive membership where we have I've got a team of 20 clinical educators that are all in practice, that are teaching different topics. Because one thing I learned, I can teach different topics. I probably won't do it justice. I want someone who's worked as a specialist in that area for multiple years to teach those areas. And what I say to the people that sign up for this membership is I say, we're so confident in what we offer. If you complete this course and you don't pass that registration assessment, we give you a full refund.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's bold.
It's bold. So currently we have a 98% pass rate across the board, and we have only had to ever give one refund. It was painful.
But that's an incredible achievement.
Absolutely. So what I offer for the 2% that don't pass the assessment, they either can walk away with a refund and say, look, I'll spend it elsewhere for another provider, or we can extend their membership and support them for the research. So the majority of the 2% that have failed have taken that option, and that gives me some confidence in the fact that I feel like we're in a position where people believe in us, right?
Well, they all clearly do. I mean, those are incredible statistics. I mean, really incredible. It's not, it doesn't sound like the norm.
Yeah. So the pass rate for the assessment floats between 60 to 75%. So it differs there's two assessments during the year. So generally for the June assessment, it'll float between 70 to 75%. And it will be approximately it could be 60, anywhere between the region of 60 to 70% for the November assessment. So having that disparity, like knowing that we can get 98% of our cohort through that assessment, and we do identify a lot of weaknesses in terms of those who are not successful. Sometimes it's like glaringly obvious. So I spoke to a trainee that didn't pass the calculations aspect of the assessment, but they had not completed any calculation videos on the platform because they felt confident in calculations. And that's where you say, no matter how confident you feel.
So it's important for you to analyze the 2% that don't pass. You want to understand
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And like I say to you, sometimes you will get a case, like the one case that I had, they completed everything and didn't pass the assessment. And those, like, even if we've got 5,000 people through that assessment, that one just still hurts, right? Because you're like, we gave you like something really comprehensive with 21 of us teaching you. So yeah, those situations like that, you'll still have some dissatisfaction.
I get it. But I mean, still, in terms of a success to failure ratio, I can't think of any comparisons at all. So well done.
Thank you.
All right, we're coming towards the end. I've got some more kind of not rapid fire, but more kind of quick questions. What's the most underrated skill for a pharmacist?
Oh, okay. So I've spoken about this before. And for me, it's compassion, right? We focus a lot on clinical knowledge, but if there's no compassion in your voice and you showing empathy for that person that's in front of you, it just, that information that you give does not land. That's one thing that I've learned from a lot of the experienced pharmacists that I've worked with. The pharmacist that a patient would consider a great pharmacist is the one that's compassionate, that the one that understands the pain that they're going through, and the one that can explain things in a way that they can understand. And for me, like a patient, that's what a patient remembers when they speak to someone. So even if you have all the clinical knowledge, but you show no compassion in that consultation, you won't get anywhere.
That makes perfect sense. Name one drug that students always mispronounce.
Oh. So there's one antiplatelet medication called clopidogrel. And because there's a dog in the middle, you get so many people clopidogrel, clopidogrel. So, but there's a whole long list of medications that are mispronounced quite often.
Give me a clinical topic that you could talk about for hours.
Oh, I've spoken about it a lot in this podcast as well, but antimicrobial resistance. I think there's a huge appreciation for the fact that we have antibiotics and there was a life before antibiotics. And
it was very different to the one now.
100%. A simple cut could lead to death.
Yeah.
So appreciation for antibiotics and wanting them to last as long as they can.
Can you tell me one myth about pharmacy you'd love to bust?
I think I think a lot of the public do not understand the amount of information that is assessed essentially through our undergraduate studies, throughout our training year. And because of the fact that a lot of the pharmacists that you see work in stores, on the street, and are not working in hospitals or GP practices, even though that's changing, people really misinterpret the amount of clinical knowledge pharmacists have. And I wish that pharmacists were appreciated more in the realm of looking at other healthcare professionals like doctors and nurses.
I think that is changing, especially with in the recent years, governments driving people to pharmacies as a point of medical advice. That's quite recent. That's quite new.
Yeah, essentially that's the Pharmacy First scheme. And even with that, there was a lot of hesitancy when it was being rolled out. But I think it's moving generally in a positive direction.
I would agree. Yeah. I would agree. What's your favorite way, or what was your favorite way to recharge after a long shift?
So I still do this. Surprised you, and I still do this to this day. Is a coffee at 7 p.m. Yeah, a lot of people don't agree with me. I probably the science doesn't agree with me.
Yeah,
but evening coffees, I still do it.
Even I can't do coffee at 7 p.m. Man. What's one message you'd like to leave to pharmacy students or healthcare professionals who want to make an impact?
Goes back to what I said before, and the most important thing for you to master is empathy and compassion. You really need to show that you care about your patients, and that's the one thing that will be remembered the most.
It's really nice to hear that from a pharmacist. It really is. Where can our listeners or viewers find you? Online, social media? Come on, plug away. Plug everything.
So my handle is MicroPharm. So that's farm with PH. But yeah, MicroPharm is where you can find me on social media.
And website?
MicroPharm.uk.
So. There we go. Fantastic. Well, look, thanks so much for coming on board. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel.